Hello, my name is Alexis Jaimez, and this is my mini lecture for Chapter 13 and 14. The learning objective I chose for Chapter 13 is to discuss the differences between symmetric and asymmetric bilateral transfer. One difference. Starting off with asymmetric bilateral transfer, it has a greater transfer from one limb than from another limb. Now, symmetric transfer is the amount of transfer that is similar from one limb to another, regardless of which was first used. In symmetric transfer, we have transfer that is equal between both limbs. The presence of symmetric means the transfer is equal, and the presence of asymmetric means the transfer is unequal. An example of symmetric bilateral transfer is learning how to juggle with one hand and then quickly picking up the skill with the other hand with minimal indifference in performance. Another example of symmetric bilateral transfer that people can relate to is writing with your dominant hand, but then afterwards you start learning how to write with your other non-dominant hand and actually are able to have the same skill level as if you were writing with your dominant hand. Typically, symmetric bilateral transfer is when someone learns to perform a motor skill with one hand and then easily applies that same skill to the other hand while showing equal level of proficiency or skillfulness with both hands. An example of asymmetric bilateral transfer is like a tennis player practicing with their forehand with their dominant hand and then seeing a larger improvement in their backhand with their non-dominant hand. Now, for asymmetric bilateral transfer, someone can significantly improve their performance on a task with their non-dominant hand after practicing with their dominant hand. But the improvement in their dominant hand after practicing with their non-dominant hand is much smaller. Now, that's pretty much it for chapter 13, so I'm just going to move on to chapter 14. The learning objective I chose for chapter 14 was to define verbal cues and give examples of how they can be used in skill learning or relearning situations. Now, the definition of verbal cues are they're short, concise phrases that serve to direct the performer's attention to regulatory conditions in the environmental context, prompt keys movement components of skills. Also, professor mentioned that verbal cues could steal attention from the performers, which can be a good thing as well, just like how it directs the performer's attention to that regulatory condition. Verbal cues can be used in several different ways. Verbal cues can be given by an instructor or performer to direct an observer's attention during a demonstration of a skill, direct a performer's attention to a critical part of a skill or multiple skills, prompt movements while even performing a skill. Also, we should make sure to also add variations to verbal cues and adapt to those variations so that we can see the best effects for our performers in these different verbal cue scenarios. But that's pretty much it for my mini lecture for chapter 13 and 14. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great Thanksgiving break.